You've had some time to take the Check Your Knowledge 1.2 Sternger quiz, so now we're going to check it together in class. You should have, at this point, nothing on your desk except for the quiz and a colored pencil from this container that's over here under Go for the Gold. And so as we check, I need you to be writing down everything that I write down. So if I write it on the board, you write it on the board. If you need to pause the video and rewind it, you should be able to both hear me and see what I'm writing on the board. So the first question, which of the following best describes Sternger? Is it processes that plants and animals perform at any given moment? Or processes that all living organisms perform at any given moment? Or processes that plants and animals perform at some point during their lifetime? Or processes that all living organisms perform at some point during their lifetime? The best answer is here. This might be D, but all living organisms, we want to put a big box around all. Every single living organisms perform Sternger, and not at any particular moment, but instead at some point during their lifetime. So an organism might not be excreting right that minute, but that doesn't mean that they won't perform excretion at some point during their lifetime. So we need to know what Sternger is. So this question tells us what Sternger is. It's the set of processes or characteristics that living things perform. Number 2, one website defines respiration as transport of oxygen from the outside air to the cells within tissues. That's a pretty science definition. What most important idea is missing from this definition? Is it missing the use of structures such as lungs to transport oxygen? The release of carbon dioxide waste? Well, these are true things. If we're transporting oxygen, a lot of times we use structures such as lungs, and we release carbon dioxide waste. But the most important thing from Sternger that we're missing is the use of respiration to break down carbs for energy. That's the most important thing. The reason that you need oxygen is to break down carbs to get energy. Number 3, which of the following is false about homeostasis? Is homeostasis the maintaining of internal conditions? That is true. We need to cross this part off. Check all of the boxes that are true. Next, homeostasis helps organisms respond when the environment changes. That is true. Does it involve all 8 Sternger processes? That is true. Or does it occur only when the environment changes? That is false. So that's the correct answer. Homeostasis is happening all of the time. Number 4, define excretion. Excretion is you needed to talk about getting rid of waste. So you had to have something about the word waste and something about getting rid of it. Number 5, give an example of synthesis in plants. And so what we need to know about number 5 is we need it to both be an example of synthesis and an example that happens in plants. So your answers might vary, but I want you to write down what I'm writing down. Photosynthesis. This is something that was on your Sternger card. Photosynthesis is when plants make carbs. And then we also talked about making waxes, making hormones, and making chemicals. Those are all examples of plants making something. So at this point, you've taken the Sternger quiz. You've seen some questions and you've gotten some feedback. These are not the exact questions that are on your test. However, they are the levels that might be on your test. So what we want to do now is we want to look at how do you make a study guide. So now I'm going to ask that somebody pass out the study guide sheet. Please pause the video until the study guide sheets are all passed out. Once all the study guide sheets are passed out, we're going to go through this together, and I'm going to help you set this up. For your Unit 1 study guide, I need you to write that in Unit 1, we're being tested on the scientific method, and we're being tested on the characteristics of life. Scientific method and characteristics of life. So what we kind of want to do is divide your paper in half. I'm going to draw a dotted line. You might fold your paper. Half of your paper needs to be about the scientific method, and the other half needs to be about characteristics of life. Now, if you would like to use the front and the back, or your own pieces of paper, that's fine too. A good study guide includes resources from your notes, your class activities, and your quizzes. It also includes study questions on all levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So here are the levels of Bloom's taxonomy. I've already written them for you. Your job is to go back and create questions using your notes, your class activities, and quizzes. So for example, we're going to do a few together. If I were to ask a question that is a remember question, I might ask, what is a control group? That is a remember question about the scientific method. I also might ask, what does Sternger stand for? I'd like for you to come up with 2 more questions that are remember level questions. 1 more for scientific method and 1 more for characteristics of life. Now for this to be a good study guide, you're actually going to have to answer the questions and study them as well. Next we have understand, give the meaning. So give the meaning is where we are going to try to define or explain why. So you might ask, why do you need a control group? That's the meaning. Why do we need a control group? This is just what it is, and this is why we need it. And then an understand question about characteristics of life might be, what does Sternger tell about an object? So if I have an object, like a pen, what would Sternger tell me about this pen? Next we have apply, which is address a new situation. So I need to think about something that I could apply the scientific method to. So when I think of apply, I might think of, let's take the example of Miss Scamizzi's dog. Scamizzi's dog and caffeine. And now I might ask, what is the control group? Question mark. Okay, so you should be able to answer that. If I'm designing an experiment about my dog and giving my dog caffeine, you should be able to tell me what the control group is. Again, for each of these levels, I'm giving you a question and you need to write a question and answer it. So here, address a new situation, we might say that we have a seedling that has sprouted. Which Sternger can be seen? I'm giving you a new situation, a seedling sprouting, and you are telling me what sterngers can be seen. You also need to make up your own question there. So remember, for each group, I'm giving you a question that you have to answer, and you have to write a question and answer it as well. So now we're up to analyze, evaluate, and create. So when we talk about analyzing, we are comparing and contrasting. Remember, we have our scientific method side and our Sternger side. So when we analyze or compare and contrast, I want to know what is the difference between an IV and a DV. And I want to know what is the difference between growth and development and reproduction. Next we have evaluate. Now remember, you have to write a question for each of these that's on the analyze level. Now we have to evaluate, which means to critique or judge. So in an example of evaluate, you might explain why an experiment with no control is not a good experiment. And if we evaluate, we might be able to judge whether an animal, let's say a fox, is living using Sternger. And finally, we have create. Now remember, you have to write your own here. Finally, we have create, which is design a new model. So here, I'm going to ask you to design a lab with seeds. And here, I'm going to ask you to pick an organism, a living thing, and explain how it Sterngers. So this is your study guide. You need to finish writing the questions and you need to finish answering the questions. And then your test will be on Wednesday. You'll turn the study guide into a box at the front of the room, as well as turning in your packet. For the rest of today, you need to finish making the study guide, answering the study guide, and putting your packet together to be ready to turn in tomorrow. Good luck studying.